My name is Cora Simmons. I'm 31 years old. And on the afternoon of my baby shower, I found my mother sitting on the front porch steps of my own home, locked out, holding a gift bag shaped like a duck, while my mother-in-law stood inside rearranging the decorations my mom had spent 3 weeks making by hand. She had changed the whole room, took down the yellow streamers Mom had hung from the ceiling and replaced them with white ones she bought that morning. Put away the handmade banner that said, "Welcome little one," in my mother's careful painted letters. And when I asked my husband Derek why my parents were outside, he looked at me with tired eyes and said 7 words that unraveled everything I thought I had built with him. I stood in my living room, 8 months pregnant, feet swollen in my house slippers, and I made a decision right there that changed the direction of my whole life. What I said, what he did, and what happened to his mother after that. That's the story I need to tell you today. Before I go any further, take a second to like and subscribe, but only if this story earns it. Drop your city and your local time in the comments. I always love seeing where you all are watching from. Now let me take you back to the beginning, back to Harlow, Georgia. A town so small the post office closes for lunch and everybody waves at cars they don't recognize just in case. I grew up on Sycamore Drive in a yellow house with a green door that my father, Ernest Simmons, painted himself the summer before I started kindergarten. He picked that green because I told him it looked like a frog and I liked frogs. He never repainted it. Not once in 26 years. My dad drove a county school bus for 31 years. Same route, same roads, same kids every morning at 6:45. He knew every child stopped by heart and never once left early. His uniform was always pressed. He kept a small notebook in his shirt pocket where he wrote down the names of new riders so he could greet them properly on day 2. He believed a child's name, spoken right on the right morning, could change how they felt about the whole day. My mother, Beulah Simmons, sewed alterations out of our back room. Wedding dresses, choir robes, Halloween costumes, prom gowns, whatever people brought her. She charged less than she should have and never turned away anyone who couldn't pay in full. She'd say, "Pay me when you can, honey." And somehow they always did. Our house smelled like fabric softener and whatever was on the stove. There was always something on the stove. We didn't have a lot. I knew that even as a little girl. But I never felt the absence of anything because my parents made our home feel like the whole world was inside it. I went to state college on a partial scholarship and waitressed Tuesday through Saturday to cover the rest. I graduated with a degree in social work and took a job at a family resource center 2 towns over. I drove 38 minutes each way for 4 years and never called it a sacrifice because I loved the work. I helped families find housing, navigate benefits, get their children into programs, hold their lives together when everything felt like it was coming apart. By 29, I had my own apartment, a reliable car, and more satisfaction in my work than I had expected to feel this young. I had built a quiet, steady life, and I thought the man I chose understood the value of quiet and steady. I was wrong about that. I met Derek Fowler at a birthday cookout for my coworker Janelle in August, 3 years before all of this. He came with Janelle's cousin. He was tall, easy to laugh, the kind of man who carries other people's chairs without being asked. We talked by the cooler for 2 hours and exchanged numbers before the sun went down. Derek was an account manager at a mid-sized insurance firm. Steady job, his own place, no drama that I could see. We dated for 8 months before I met his mother, Vivian Fowler. He had mentioned her often. She was particular, he always said. Particular about food, particular about manners, particular about the way a table was set. I thought particular meant she cared about things. I would learn it meant she needed to control them. The Fowlers weren't wealthy in the way that has a family name on a building, but Vivian carried herself like she was waiting for that to change. She had opinions the way some people have furniture, everywhere taking up space, arranged by her own logic. The first time I had dinner at her house, she asked me 3 questions in the first 5 minutes. What neighborhood did I grow up in? Whether my parents owned or rented? And had I ever been to Europe? She didn't ask about my work or my education or anything I had done, only where I came from and what it looked like. I answered honestly, Sycamore Drive. And no, not yet, but I'd like to one day. She nodded slowly like she was filing my answers somewhere unflattering. Derek told me later that she liked me. I did not believe him. But I loved Derek. And I told myself that a mother-in-law's approval wasn't the foundation of a marriage. The relationship was. I held on to that. For a long time, longer than I should have. Derek proposed on a Thursday evening in our apartment. No restaurant, no audience. Just him on one knee in the kitchen while pasta boiled on the stove behind him. I said yes before he finished the sentence. It was the most honest moment of our relationship. Then the planning began, and the honesty got harder to find. Vivian wanted a venue in the city. I wanted our church hall in Harlow. Vivian won. Vivian wanted a caterer she had used at her sorority reunion. My mother had offered to cook. Vivian told Derek that a home-cooked wedding reception was not appropriate for the guest list she was planning. My mother found out through me, not through an apology, not through a conversation. Through me, quietly in our kitchen, while I tried to make her feel like it wasn't personal when it absolutely was. Every time I told Derek something felt wrong, he had a version of the same answer. That's just how she is, Cora. She means well. She's excited. I want my mother to feel included. And I kept choosing peace over clarity because I thought peace was the same as progress. It is not. Peace built on silence is just a delay. I was delaying. I knew something was off. I felt it the way you feel weather changing before it actually changes. Something in the pressure of things. But I was in love and I was busy, and I kept talking myself back to the edge of the ledge and then stepping away from it. That was my mistake. Not choosing Derek. Not getting married. Not any one decision. The mistake was believing that staying quiet was the same as keeping the peace, and that keeping the peace was the same as protecting something worth protecting. It wasn't. It was just postponing. 3 months into the marriage, I found out I was pregnant. I sat on the bathroom floor for a full 10 minutes with the test in my hand, just feeling the weight of it. Good weight. Real weight. I was going to be a mother. When I told Derek, he cried, which surprised me. I hadn't seen him cry before. Happy tears, the good kind. He called his mother before I had finished telling my own parents, which I noticed and tucked away. My mother cried too when I told her. She put her hand on my face the way she has done since I was small, palm against my cheek, and said, "You're going to be so good at this." My father sat down at the kitchen table and was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "I'm going to build that baby a bookshelf." He started it the following weekend. The pregnancy was smooth, mostly. Tired first trimester, hungry second trimester, swollen everywhere by the third. I kept working until 36 weeks because sitting still made me feel anxious and my clients needed consistency. Derek was attentive in the practical ways. He went to the appointments. He assembled the crib. He made grocery runs at odd hours without being asked. I thought that meant we were solid. I thought showing up for logistics was the same as showing up for everything. We were not solid. We had a surface. And surfaces look real until something hits them. The baby shower was my mother's idea and my planning. She wanted to host it at our house, mine and Derek's house, which felt right to me. My home. My baby. My mother's hands involved in every part of the celebration. We set the date for a Saturday in March when I was 34 weeks along. Mom drove up 2 days early. She brought her good tablecloth, the ivory one she's had since 1994. With the embroidered border she did herself during the winter. She had a bad knee and couldn't stand long. She brought mason jars filled with dried lavender from her back garden. She brought the banner she had been painting for 2 weeks in her back room. Block letters in yellow and green, and a small painted bird in the corner because she knew I loved birds growing up. She and I decorated the whole living room the Friday night before. Took us 4 hours and we laughed the entire time. At midnight we stood back and looked at what we had made, and my mother said, "This is perfect, baby." And she was right. It was perfect. I went to bed happy. Vivian arrived Saturday morning at 9, 2 hours before the shower was set to begin. I was in the bedroom getting dressed when I heard the front door, and then voices, and then the particular silence that follows when something is wrong but no one has said it yet. came out into the hallway. My mother was standing near the kitchen looking at the living room. The banner was gone. The mason jars were moved to the back counter away from the tables. The yellow streamers were down and white ones had been put up in their place. White carnations in glass vases stood on the tables where my mother's lavender had been. Vivian was standing at the center of it all with a tote bag of supplies and the efficient expression of someone who believes they are improving a situation. I said, "Vivian, where are my mother's decorations?" She said they were in a bag in the hall closet. She said the lavender was a nice touch, but she had something more put together in mind. She used the word put together, as though what my mother had created with her own hands over 2 weeks was scattered. As though my mother's work was something to be tidied away. I looked at Derek. He was standing near the back door with his coffee. He was looking at the floor. I said his name. He said, "Cora, she's just trying to help. Let her finish. Let her finish." As though my mother's decorations being taken down and placed in a closet was a project that simply needed completion. I went back to the bedroom. And I sat on the edge of the bed and I counted to 20. I was trying to decide how to handle this. I was trying to be calm. I was trying to remember that this was supposed to be a joyful day. I came back out and I said, firmly and clearly, that I wanted my mother's banner back up and the lavender back on the tables. Vivian looked at me with that patient expression that is not patience at all but performance. She said my mother's things were lovely, but today had a certain feel she was going for, and she thought we would all agree the room looked more elegant now. More elegant. There was that word. I looked at my mother. Beulah Simmons, who has sewn wedding gowns and prom dresses and choir robes. Beulah Simmons, who hand-painted that banner letter by letter. My mother, who was standing in my living room looking at her work in a closet bag and not saying a single thing because she was trying to protect my day and my peace. And she was too gracious to make it about herself. That was the moment I understood exactly who Vivian Fowler was, and exactly what this marriage had been doing to my family in slow, quiet ways I had been calling compromise. I turned to Derek. I asked him directly to tell his mother to put my mother's decorations back. He rubbed the back of his neck. He said, "Can we just get through today? Mom put in a lot of effort this morning. A lot of effort. She put in effort this morning, dismantling what my mother built across 2 weeks and 1 late evening." I said, "Derek, her banner, lavender, right now." He said, "Cora, you're getting worked up. It's just decorations. Just decorations." It was. That phrase landed exactly the way a phrase lands when it tells you something you already knew and were hoping wasn't true. To Derek, in that moment, my mother's labor was just decorations. My mother's time was just decorations. My mother's love, pressed into paint and dried lavender and an embroidered tablecloth from 1994, was just decorations. And I could see on his face that he had said this kind of thing before, and expected me to absorb it the way I had been absorbing things and move forward so the guests could arrive and everyone could smile and pretend the morning had not happened. I walked to the hall closet. I took out the bag with my mother's banner and I carried it to the living room. Vivian said my name in that particular tone that means stop. I did not stop. I took the banner out and I unrolled it on the kitchen table. The paint was careful and bright. The little bird in the corner had tiny detail in its wing. The kind of detail you only put in when you love what you are doing. I held it up and I looked at Derek and I said, "This is going back up. If that is a problem for you, then we have a bigger problem than decorations." He said nothing. Vivian made a sound in her throat. I began to hang the banner back up. My mother came to help me and she did not say one word. She just stood next to me and held the other end, and together we put it back where she had hung it the night before. When we finished, I turned to Vivian and I said, as clearly as I have ever said anything, "This is my home. My baby. My mother made these things for me with her own hands. You are a guest in this space today, and I need you to act like one." Vivian looked at Derek. Derek looked at me. I looked at my mother, who was very carefully rearranging the lavender jars on the table and not looking at anyone, because she has never in her life wanted anyone to fight on her behalf, even when she deserved it more than anyone I have ever known. Vivian left the room. She went to the guest bathroom and stayed there for 11 minutes. I know because I counted. Derek followed me to the kitchen and said, quietly, that I had humiliated his mother. I said his mother had humiliated mine, and the difference was that his mother had meant to. He did not answer that. He could not answer that because we both knew it was true. The guests began arriving at 11. My co-workers from the resource center, my college friends, Aunt Denise from Macon and her twin girls who were 9 and kept touching my belly and asking if the baby could hear them. Janelle, who had first introduced me to Derek. Neighbors from Harlow who had known me since I was small. Vivian's guests came too. Her sorority sisters, her neighbor Patricia, 2 women from her church. The room filled and it was beautiful, and my mother's banner hung across the back wall and the lavender sat on every table, and I stood in the middle of all of it, 8 months pregnant in a yellow dress, and I felt something settle in me. Not joy exactly. Something underneath joy. Something more like resolve. We played games and opened gifts and ate my mother's pound cake, which Vivian had also attempted to swap out for a bakery cake she had ordered. A swap I discovered and reversed that morning when I found the bakery box in the trunk of Vivian's car. I served both eggs, my mother's and the bakery's. My mother's was gone in 12 minutes. 3 people asked for the recipe. Vivian's cake had 2 slices taken. The afternoon could have ended there, and it would have been a story about a difficult mother-in-law and a tense morning resolved. But around 2:30, my mother came to find me in the kitchen where I was getting more napkins, and she said, "Cora, honey, I just want you to know that Vivian told me earlier I should have cleared the decorating with her first since this is a family event." I set the napkins down. I said, "She said what?" My mother repeated it, word for word, because Beulah Simmons has a precise memory and never exaggerates. Vivian had found my mother privately, away from the group, and told her that proper etiquette in situations like this was to coordinate with the immediate family first. Immediate family. Vivian. Not my mother, who is the grandmother of this child. Not my mother, who had driven 2 hours and brought her tablecloth and her lavender and her painted letters. Vivian had gone to my mother while I was not there and assigned her a lesser place in the order of things. That was the moment I stopped being angry and became something quieter and more certain. I went and found Derek. He was on the back porch with his phone. I told him what his mother had said to mine. He sighed. He said, "Cora, Mom is old-fashioned about family roles. She doesn't mean it the way it sounds." I said, "Your mother went to my mother, privately, while I was not there, and told her she should have cleared things with her first." He said, "She's just particular about things." Particular. That word again. The same word he had used for 3 years to make his mother's behavior sound like a personality trait instead of a pattern. I looked at him and I said, "Derek, your mother disrespected my mother 3 times today. She took down her decorations. She tried to remove her cake. And then she went and told her privately that she overstepped in her own daughter's home. 3 times. He was quiet. I said, "What are you going to do about it?" He said, "What do you want me to do? Get into it with my mother at your baby shower." I said, "Our baby shower? Yes, that's exactly what I want you to do. I want you to go to your mother and tell her that Beulah Simmons is the grandmother of your child and she deserves to be treated like it." He looked away. He said, "I'll talk to her later." Later. Not now when it mattered. Not in front of the person who had been hurt. Later in private where it would cost him nothing. I understood something in that moment with a clarity that pregnancy makes sharp. My husband would always choose his mother's comfort over my mother's dignity. Not because he was cruel. Because he had never once been asked to choose before and had never built the muscle for it. He didn't know how. And I had spent 3 years handing him opportunities to learn, and he had declined every single one of them while smiling at me with that easy laugh I had fallen in love with at a cookout in August. The guests started leaving around 4. Hugs and gift bags and promises to meet the baby when she arrived. My mother was washing dishes in the kitchen when Vivian appeared in the doorway and said she thought she would help clean up. My mother said that was kind and moved to make room. Vivian picked up dish towel And then she said casually, the way people say things they have been rehearsing, "You know, Beulah, I hope today wasn't too much for you. It can be overwhelming when you're not used to events of this size." My mother kept washing dishes. I was standing in the hallway. "I don't think Vivian saw me," my mother said quietly. "I think it went very well," Vivian said. "Of course. But going forward with a baby coming, it might be easier if you let me handle these kinds of things. I have more experience with this sort of hosting. Let me handle it." More experience. In my mother's hearing. As though Beulah Simmons, who raised a daughter, ran a sewing business, fed a neighborhood, and hand-painted a banner for her grandchild, needed Vivian Fowler to explain the hosting of family events to her. I walked into that kitchen. I said, "Vivian, return." I said, "My mother is not a guest in this baby's life. She is the grandmother. She will be at every event, every birthday, every Sunday dinner. She will host things and plan things and make things because that is who she is and that is what this family looks like. And if that doesn't work for you, I need you to tell me that right now, today, while we can all still be honest about it." Vivian stared at me. Derek had come in from the back porch. He was standing in the kitchen doorway. I looked at him. I said, "Derek, I need you to tell your mother what you told me in the car 3 weeks ago." He had told me privately, during an argument about his mother's comments at Easter, that he knew she could be too much and that he would set limits after the baby came. He had used those words. Set limits. After the baby came. I was calling it forward. Right now, today, in front of her before the baby came. He looked at me. He looked at his mother. He said, "Mom, Cora just needs things to go a certain way right now. She's emotional. It's the pregnancy. Emotional. It's the pregnancy." 8 months pregnant, standing in my own kitchen, having watched my mother be diminished 3 separate times in her own daughter's home. And the explanation my husband offered was that I was emotional from the pregnancy. I looked at him for a long moment. I looked at my mother, who had set down the dish she was washing and was looking at her hands. I looked at Vivian, who was watching me with an expression that was almost satisfied, the way people look when they believe the ground is holding under them. And then I said the thing that ended my marriage. Not loudly, not dramatically, calmly, the way I say things at work when a family is in crisis and I need every word to land clean and clear. I said, "Derek, I need you to make a decision right now. Not after the baby. Not later. Right now. Either you tell your mother that my mother is an equal in this family and you back that up with how you act going forward, or I need you to understand that I am not able to build a life with someone who will not protect his own child's grandmother from being treated this way inside our home." Vivian said my name. I looked at her and said, "I'm talking to my husband." He stopped. Derek stood there for what felt like a full minute. His jaw was working like he was choosing between sentences. And then he said, "Cora, you need to calm down. We can talk about this when the guests are gone and you're not so wound up." He nodded. I took my phone off the counter. I called my mother's name and she came to stand beside me. I said, "Mom, get your tablecloth. We're going to sit on the porch." My mother looked at me. She looked at Derek. She looked at Vivian. Then she walked to the dining room and picked up her ivory tablecloth with the embroidered border, and she folded it over her arm the way she has folded fabric her whole life. Neatly, with care, because that is who Beulah Simmons is. She came back and stood beside me. I picked up the mason jars with the dried lavender, all 6 of them, and carried them to the front door. I opened the front door and my mother and I sat down on the front porch steps in the mild March afternoon, and I set the lavender jars around us and I called my father. I told him what had happened. He was quiet for a moment and then he said, "You want me to come get your mother?" I said, "No, Daddy. We're okay. I just needed you to know." He said, "I'm proud of you, baby girl." I had to breathe through that for a second. Derek came to the door once. He looked at me and my mother sitting on the steps with the lavender jars. He said, "Cora, come inside." I said, "When you're ready to have a real conversation." He went back in. Vivian's car left 20 minutes later. When I came back inside, Derek was in the living room. I sat across from him. I said, I want to tell you what I need. He said, I know what you need. You need to let me manage my mother in my own way. I said, she told my mother she should have cleared the decorations with her in my home about my baby shower. He said, that's how mom talks. You can't take everything so literally. I said, I'm not taking it literally. I'm taking it seriously. There's a difference. He said, Cora, she's my mother. And there it was, finally stripped of everything else. She's my mother. As though that answered every question. As though that settled every scale. As though my mother, Beulah Simmons, who drove 2 hours and hung a banner and brought her tablecloth and her lavender, deserved less consideration because she had a different last name. I said, and this is my mother. And this is our daughter's grandmother. And today, in our home, your mother treated mine like she was less than 3 times. And you let her. Every time. He said, what do you want from me? I said, I already told you. I needed you to stand up for my mother. Today. In front of her. You didn't. He looked down. He said, I don't see why this has to be such a big deal. That sentence. The particular despair of that sentence. I want you to understand something about that sentence. My husband did not say he disagreed with me. He did not say his mother had done nothing wrong. He said he did not see why it was a big deal. And what that meant, what that revealed, was that he had watched everything that happened that day, and inside his own assessment it had registered as small. My mother's dignity, small. My mother's labor, small. My mother being privately corrected in her own daughter's home, small. I was not small. My mother was not small. I said, I know. And I got up. And I went to the bedroom. I did not sleep well that night. I lay on my side with my hand on my stomach, and I thought about the kind of world my daughter was about to be born into, and the kind of grandmother who would help shape her. Beulah Simmons. Who makes things with her hands. Who gives people more when they can't pay. Who knows every child's name and which ones need extra. My daughter would know this woman. Closely and fully. And nothing about the marriage I was in was going to change that. Question was only how. I thought about it for 2 weeks. Derek and I were civil during that time. Careful. We were like 2 people who had been told not to discuss something, and were honoring that instruction even though neither of us had given it. I went to work. He went to work. We ate dinner. We did not talk about the baby shower. He did not apologize. I did not push. I was waiting for something. I think I was waiting to see if he would come to me. If he would sit down at the table one evening and say, Cora, I've been thinking about what happened and I need to do better. He did not come. He never came. What he did instead, on a Thursday evening 2 weeks after the shower, was come home and tell me his mother had decided she would like to be in the delivery room. Not ask. Decided. I said, no. He said she had been there for his sister's delivery and it was important to her. I said, your mother is not going to be in the delivery room. He said he thought we could at least talk about it. I said, there is nothing to talk about. This is my body and my delivery, and my mother will be there, and that is the complete list. He said, I was being rigid. I said I was being a mother. He said he didn't understand why everything had to be a battle. And I heard it then, the real shape of things. To Derek, my choosing my mother over his mother was a battle. My having a boundary was a battle. My asking him to stand up for my family was a battle. Everything that required him to cost his mother something was a battle. And he had decided that the life with the fewest battles was the best life, even if that meant my mother always lost. I told him that night that I thought we needed to talk to someone. Counselor. He said he didn't think we were at that point. I said I thought we had passed that point and were trying to decide what came after it. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, are you saying you want to leave? I said, I'm saying I cannot raise a daughter in a home where her grandmother is treated as less than and her father calls it just how mom talks. He said, so yes. I said, I'm saying I need things to change and I need them to change before she arrives. And I need you to decide if you can do that. He said he needed time to think. I said, I understand that. I need an answer by Sunday. Sunday came. He made us breakfast. He was kind and careful in the kitchen, and I sat at the table and watched him and thought about the man I had met at Janelle's cookout, who carried chairs and laughed easily and said my parents were wonderful people. He set a plate in front of me and sat down and said, "Cora, I love you. I love this baby. But I can't control my mother." He said, "I'm not asking you to control her. I'm asking you to have a spine with her." He said, "That's not fair." I said, "No. What's not fair is my mother sitting on my porch steps at my own baby shower because your mother decided her work wasn't good enough for the room." He said, "She wasn't forced out there." I said, "She walked out because she was being erased inside and she was too gracious to make a scene about it, and you know that." He looked at his eggs. He didn't answer. I said, "Sunday was the deadline. That's your answer." He said, "Cora, don't do this." I said, "I'm not doing anything. I'm just hearing what you said." Ate my breakfast. Was good. He has always been a good cook. I thought about that while I ate. How strange it was to sit across from someone who can make you a beautiful breakfast and cannot make you feel safe in the same motion. After breakfast, I called my mother. I told her I was leaving Derek. She was quiet for a moment and then she said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Do you need help?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Your father and I will be there Friday." They were there. Thursday. I moved back to Harlow at 35 weeks pregnant. My old bedroom had been repainted at some point, a soft yellow now, and the curtains my mother had made years ago were still there. I lay down on the bed the first night and looked at the ceiling and felt something release in my chest, like a knot I had been holding so long I had forgotten it was there. Derek called every day for 2 weeks. I answered once. He said he thought I was making a mistake. I said, "I know you think that." He said, "I want to be there for the baby." I said, "We'll work that out through the proper channels." He said, "Proper channels? Cora, she's my daughter." I said, "Then make sure you show up for her the way you couldn't show up for her grandmother." He didn't have an answer for that. I filed the paperwork at 37 weeks, which is not how I imagined doing it, but life does not wait for the right moment. It only gives you the moment it gives you and asks what you plan to do with it. My co-worker Denisha, who had been through a divorce herself 3 years before, covered 2 of my cases without me asking. "I have a whole lunch for you next week," she said. "The single mother thing is hard, but you're going to be so good at it." Held on to that. There were hard nights. 8 months pregnant and alone in my childhood bedroom with my mother's curtains and the sound of my father watching the news down the hall. Not regret. I want to say that clearly. Not 1 second of regret. But grief for the thing I thought I was building. For the version of my life where Derek had been who I needed him to be on one crucial afternoon in March. I grieved that version for a while. Let myself feel the full weight of it. Then I got up and made plans. Naomi Louise Simmons came into the world on a Wednesday morning at 7:02, 6 pounds 14 ounces, with a full head of dark hair and the loudest cry I have ever heard from something that small. Simmons. I gave her my name. My family's name. The name of a school bus driver who wrote children's names in a notebook so he could greet them properly. And a seamstress who told people to pay her when they could and always meant it. My mother was in the delivery room. My father was in the waiting area, and he paced so much the nurses started checking on him. He held Naomi first, after me, after the nurses cleared her. He sat in the chair by the window and held her against his chest and looked out at the morning and didn't say anything for a long time. Then he said very quietly to her, "Your grandpa has been driving this road a long time. I've been waiting for you at the stop." Cried. My mother cried. The nurse pretended to check something on a chart and also cried. 6 weeks after, Naomi was born. A message arrived through a mutual connection. Not Vivian. Derek's aunt, his father's sister. A woman named Gloria who had met me twice at family events and been kind both times. She said Vivian had been telling people within the family that I had become difficult during the pregnancy, and that the separation was the result of my emotional state and hormones. Gloria said she didn't believe that. She said she had watched Vivian do this to other people, and she was sorry I was on the receiving end of it. She said if I ever needed a character witness in family court, she would be willing. I saved that message. I didn't respond immediately. I waited a week, then wrote back and thanked her and told her I would keep her offer in mind. I do not know if Vivian is aware her sister-in-law reached out to me. I suspect she is not. I did not tell her. Some information is better held quietly and brought out when needed. That is a thing I have learned. The custody arrangement was formalized 4 months after Naomi was born. Derek has her every other weekend and one weekday evening. He is reliable about it. Shows up on time, returns her on time, and sends me a photo from every visit without being asked, which I did not expect and which I appreciate in the clear, practical way that you can appreciate something from a person without forgiving them for everything. Vivian has not met Naomi. I set one condition in the arrangement. Any visit involving extended family on Derek's side requires either my presence or my parents' supervision until Naomi is old enough to tell me her own experience of those people. Derek agreed to that condition without arguing, which told me something about what he understood and when he finally understood it. Vivian has not agreed to those terms. She has told Derek it is an overreach. She has not met her granddaughter. Not because I closed the door, but because she will not walk through it on any terms but her own. I've thought about that a lot. About how a person can love someone or believe they love them, and still refuse to meet them on any ground that requires even a small amount of yielding. I think that kind of love is just possession wearing a different coat. I think Vivian loves Derek the way some people love something they built. As a reflection, as evidence of themselves. And she wanted Naomi to be that too. Another reflection. Another piece of evidence. And I said no. Sunday dinners at my parents' house are the organizing fact of my week now. 6 o'clock. My mother's kitchen table with the uneven leg that my father shimmed with a folded magazine 20 years ago and never replaced. The tablecloth with the embroidered border is always on it. My father's seat is the one with the armrests he added himself from a chair he found at a yard sale. My mother's seat has a cushion. She sewed in the pattern of a sunflower because she wanted to. There are no place cards, no catered menu, no sorority sisters checking whether the linens match. Janelle comes most Sundays now. She brings her boyfriend Marcus, who turns out to be wonderful and brings cornbread every single time. My co-worker Denisha and her daughter started joining us about 2 months ago. She said it was the best meal she'd had all week. My father said she better start coming every week then. She does. Naomi sits in my father's lap during dinner. He lets her grab his glasses. He always lets her. He says soft and low, the way he says things he means entirely. Your grandpa knows every stop on this road, little girl. I know exactly where you belong. She grabs his spoon and drops it on the floor. Everyone laughs. I look around this table. The window has a crack my father patched with weather stripping 3 winters ago. The overhead light is a little dim. The back door sticks. There is no string quartet, no crystal, no imported centerpiece. But every single person at this table chose to be here. Every person belongs. And no one has ever once been told they should have checked with someone else first. This is my table 1. I'm not telling you this story because I have the answers. Everyone's situation is different. Everyone's breaking point is different. And I don't know what your version of a baby shower morning looks like. But if you are in a life right now where someone keeps finding small quiet ways to put your people in a lesser place, where the person who is supposed to stand beside you keeps calling it not a big deal, where your mother's labor is just decorations and your mother's presence is something to be managed rather than celebrated, I want you to hear this. You are allowed to put things back. You are allowed to open the closet and take out the banner and rehang it yourself. You don't need permission. You don't need the argument to go your way first. You don't need him to agree before you act. You just need to know, past the exhaustion and the fear and the voice that says you are being too much, that the people who built you deserve to stand in the center of the room. Not the back, not the porch, not out of sight in the name of someone else's version of elegant. If the person you chose watches your mother be erased and calls it just how she is, that person has made a choice. They have chosen the path that costs them least. They have chosen the relationship that asks nothing of them over the one that asks everything that actually matters. That is not partnership. That is a guest list where your family doesn't make the cut. My name is Cora Simmons. I am 31 years old. I am a social worker and a mother and a shift lead and Ernest and Beulah Simmons' daughter. I live in a yellow house with a green door. That my father painted frog green because I asked him to when I was 4. My daughter Naomi laughs so loud it startles the dog next door. She drops spoons on purpose to make people pick them up. She has never been in a room where she didn't belong. She has never been put in a closet. And she has never once seen her grandmother told that what she made with her own hands was not elegant enough for the space. I did not always get things right. But I got that right. And I would get it right again every single time. That was my story. Now I want to hear yours. If you have ever had to put something back up that someone tried to take down, type banner up in the comments. If you think I made the right call or the wrong one, tell me honestly. I want to know. And would you have given Vivian another chance? That one I still think about. If you're new here and this story stayed with you, hit subscribe. I share stories like this every week. And there is another one in the description I think you will want to hear next. Thank you for being here until the very end.